Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by World Anvil. So last week, I made a video about Morbius, and I was kind of surprised to see how passionate people were about it. Sure, a lot of it was just people being ironic and making fun of the movie, but a lot of others seemed genuinely angry by just how lazy and dull the film is. There was almost a sense that the movie is almost insulting you with how bland it was willing to be, and the fact that Sony apparently felt it was acceptable to be released in this form. The whole movie just feels like it was hacked to pieces in the editing bay. Couple that with the fact that the film had a really staggering drop-off at the box office in its second week, far more than usual for a tentpole movie, and I think it's clear that this should be a wake-up call for Sony. They really need to rethink their approach to these Spider-Man spin-off movies, and I'm saying that as someone who actually liked the first Venom movie and even made a video defending it. After the sequel and Morbius, I just don't think this strategy is working.
I came out tonight to hunt Morbius. I didn't expect to find this.
But okay, if this video is some kind of Sony intervention, I think it's probably at least worth starting with the positives of their non-MCU releases. After all, it was just a few years ago that Sony put out one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's a beloved film, and I'm really excited for the sequel, Across the Spider-Verse. Even if I do think it's a little weird that they shackled it to this Part 1 branding. The whole splitting a movie into parts thing was huge like a decade ago when everyone thought they could replicate what Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows did. But after it backfired on a few franchises like Hunger Games and especially Divergent, it's a fad that seems to have mostly receded. I mean, even Doom, a film that is absolutely just the first half of a complete story, didn't call itself Doom Part 1 in the marketing, because Warner Brothers, wisely I think, knew that branding would be shooting the movie in the foot at the box office. So I'm really hoping that the quality of Across the Spider-Verse and the fact that people loved the first one as much as they did helps it out. But if it was up to me, yeah, I'm dropping that Part 1 and just finding a new title for the next movie. Still, the title thing is relatively minor, and overall I'm really happy with what Sony is doing on the Spider-Man animation side. It's definitely a lot bolder and more interesting than anything Marvel themselves have been doing with the character in animation in the past decade. And I really don't want to write off the animated movie as some secondary thing to the live-action films, because it's not. Animation is quite possibly a better medium for these characters than live-action films, and I hope that Sony is able to make more that are at the level of Spider-Verse. I think they can really shine there in an area that's completely separate from the MCU. That's opposed to the live-action side of the company, which is seemingly banking on casual fans assuming that Morbius and Venom are MCU films. Because let's just be clear here, how Morbius was marketed was kind of gross. If you're gonna keep making movies about other characters in the Spider-Man universe, I don't think the strategy of confusing your average moviegoer, and in Morbius's case, basically just lying about what's in the movie, is all that smart in the long term. Especially if the movie is as bad as Morbius is. I usually don't care about cinema scores much. That's the company that asks people walking out of the theater to give the film a letter grade. I think those scores are often less about the movie's actual quality and are more of a reflection on if the film gave audiences what the advertising sold them on. That being said, I do think it's notable that Morbius had the worst Marvel-related cinema score of any movie since 2015's Fantastic Four. If I'm Sony, I'm taking that seriously, and I'm changing how I approach these films from the ground up. So what are they gonna do? Obviously, I can't answer that, but I can say what I think would help. First off, ditch Morbius. Full on, full stop, never bring him up again. I just don't envision a future where Jared Leto's Morbius shows up in a movie and people are excited to see him. Just leave it behind. Venom, on the other hand, isn't going anywhere. He's been a cash cow for them, even if the reception to his movies have been pretty divisive. I think a third film is inevitable. And when it does happen, I really hope it's no longer just playing footsie with the MCU. If they can get Holland as Spidey in the movie, great. But if they can't, stop deceiving people with these connections that just barely exist. You know who audiences loved in No Way Home? Andrew Garfield. I think people would be thrilled to discover that he's the Spider-Man in the Venom universe. And if you can get him to show up and be a major player in the film, you don't have to keep harping on these MCU tie-ins that barely amount to anything. But beyond Venom 3 and the next MCU Spider-Man, which I've already discussed in a different video, I think Sony needs to stop trying to play catch-up and just make far more bold movies. I know that sounds way easier said than done, and it is, but Morbius is about as generic as these things get. Stop chasing that formula and try something that feels more unique and especially more visually dynamic. One of the main complaints I see about the MCU online is that it's far too visually safe. They have a house style that they stray from occasionally, but overall, audiences know what to expect from the MCU in terms of visual style. Sony can throw that expectation out the window. Get directors who want to push these films into new areas visually. Try to do for your live action films what Into the Spider-Verse successfully did with animation. I've seen a lot of animated films through the years, but Spider-Verse looked pretty different from all of them, and there's a lot of value in that. I want Sony to do what they did when they hired Sam Raimi. They found someone with a very distinct visual style and filmmaking language and let him embrace that. Now maybe some of these films should have lower budgets than Venom did, allowing them to take more risks. That's what DC did with Joker, which cost I think like less than half of what BVS did, and that worked out pretty well. Of course, the other element of this is that they just need far better scripts. I don't know what else there is to say about that I didn't already say in my last video. If a script is as bad as Morbius is, just don't make the movie. And definitely stop trying to shoehorn in references to future sequels. Sony is especially terrible at this. Amazing Spider-Man 2 would be at least 25% better if they weren't trying to set up the Sinister Six so much. And then they try to set up the Sinister Six again in Morbius, and big surprise, I think it dragged the movie down. Give these characters room to breathe. Believe that you're making a film that's entertaining and engaging in its own right, not just because you're stapling it onto a more popular character. At the end of the day, what I want from Sony's live-action Spider-Verse is pretty simple. Actually try to stand out in an interesting way. While Holland continues to do his thing, I'd like to see the other Spider-related movies just get more visually inventive and more unique. Instead of trying to be bargain bin MCU and mostly failing, make movies that people want to go to because it's offering something that they aren't getting from the MCU. Imagine giving a great director like, Robert Eggers, Kraven's Last Hunt as a starting point and just letting him run wild with a crazy, intense Kraven movie. If you're gonna go down this path of wringing money out of Spidey's supporting cast, at least do us all a favor and let people do it in an interesting way. Because what they have now with Let There Be Carnage and Morbius isn't working. Yes, they did successfully convince a lot of people to see Morbius opening weekend, but how many times can they really repeat that? Why would people have any faith in a Black Cat or Kraven movie when they've already felt so burned? I remember being very skeptical when Into the Spider-Verse was announced, but by the time it opened, it was clear that the movie was made with a lot of care and a clear, strong sense of direction. I think to win people back, Sony needs to step up to the plate and deliver that for these villain films. If they don't, audiences will lose interest pretty quickly, and who can blame them?
Good thing you don't have my spider agility. The pain! Not now! No!
I think we can all admit that the world building in these Sony spin-off films has been pretty rough. So hey, why not create your own? That's where World Anvil comes in. World Anvil is an incredible resource for writers crafting massive worlds, and it's especially perfect for role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. Recently, they introduced Whiteboard, which offers the perfect canvas for writers and artists, allowing you to organize everything cleanly and easily, and making it easy to connect the story threads how you see fit, with text articles, art pieces, and any of your own elements. Whether you're planning a long or short D&D campaign, or just trying to capture the texture and tone of your novel, World Anvil is useful for anyone with big story ideas who wants to see them executed. And if you're writing genre stuff, it's really amazing, as it makes it easy to create magic systems, family trees, and get across exactly the tone that your story requires. So head to the link in the description and use code MIDNIGHT to get 40% off the annual membership.
Here's here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.